Chapter 8. The fax machine started just as the helicopter was coming in to land. Joe stared at the curl of paper, watched as the words "Top Secret" rose slowly over the tiny plastic horizon of the portable machine, followed by a string of security codes. She glanced out through the small porthole of the military helicopter, saw low concrete buildings, a woman in shirt sleeves waving the aircraft down in the middle of a storm of dust. She looked over the roofs of the buildings for the hills that surrounded the famous gorge, but saw only a featureless red plain dotted with thorn trees. The machine in her lap beeped. Joe looked down. The body of the fax was in John Benton's neat handwriting. Joe. Computer record of Captain Jacob Hines back to June 81, but no record on microfilm. You were right. It sounds dodgy to me. I'll take it up with Brigadier Bambera ASAP. Take care, John. Joe shook her head slowly. Once, you'd have come out after me yourself, she thought. But that was a different world, a galaxy long, long ago, and far, far away. The helicopter was down now, the dust settling. The door clattered open, and the shirt-sleeved woman peered inside. Welcome to Kilgai. You Miss Grant? Joe nodded, stood up, picked up her luggage, and went to the door. Do you know where Rowena Michaels and Julie Sands were staying? Joe asked. I don't know much about it, I'm afraid. But don't worry, Captain Hines is here to meet you. He'll take you wherever you need to go. Joe felt a jolt of panic, but quickly controlled it. This was a unit flight. Hines was bound to know about it. She peered out into the hot sunshine, saw a man in a blue UN uniform walking out from the shade of one of the buildings. She clambered down to the ground and called hello. They exchanged introductions, and Joe found herself hustled into a dusty green Land Rover, which looked as though it had been around since the days when the British Army ran this part of Africa. You don't know where my colleagues Rowena Michaels and Julie Sands have got to? Joe asked, as they drove through the dusty streets. I've been trying to get in touch. I warned them to stay out of the gorge area yesterday, said Captain Hines. His accent was American West Coast, almost a caricature. Joe found herself wondering if it was a fake. I have no information about them after that time. They were out of the town now, and she could see the hills ahead, a gentle russet colour in the low sunlight. A solitary man, wearing a checked shirt and jeans, herded a few goats across a field of yellow grass by the road. It seems like a peaceful enough place. What's the problem here? Temporal anomaly, said Hines. We've got our science people onto it now. What kind of temporal anomaly? You can tell me. I used to help the chief scientific advisor to UNIT. Sergeant Benton informed me about your status, but I can't reveal anything about current operations. He's like a machine, thought Joe. She felt a chill inside her, despite the dry African heat. She wondered if she was walking into a trap. She'd always been good at that. What if I don't come back? She thought of Matthew for a moment, his bewildered, sleepy face as she had dropped him off at Cliff's. His eyes looking at Cliff, then at her. She knew he had heard their hasty whispered conversation, knew he had worked out that this was some big, terrifying adult thing that he couldn't be told about. Her heart clenched, and she turned to Hines, ready to tell him to turn the Land Rover around and take her back to the town. But he spoke first. There's a barracks hut outside the restricted area. You can sleep there. The hills were rising around them now, dark shoulders of rock blotting out the sun. Peaceful russet had turned to dark shadowed red, the colour of old blood. The sky was darkening as she watched, blue leaching away. A star appeared. The Land Rover jolted, turned off the road. Joe looked ahead, saw a couple of prefabricated buildings resting on wooden supports. There was a truck parked between them. It reminded Joe of the unit of her day, big, with round headlights and a canvas covering. They even had the old dull green paint. Joe supposed that, like Hines's Land Rover, They were on hire from the Tanzanian army. "Looks like you're planning to be here for a while," she commented. To her surprise, Hines laughed. "You sure you're not a news reporter?" He pulled up the Land Rover by the nearest of the huts. Then he took hold of her arm and squeezed it hard. Startled, Joe turned, met his eyes. "Don't even think about going into the restricted area, right?" he said. "I know why you're here. We don't need any trouble right now, so just do the job you came to do and make a good report back to Geneva, right?" Joe stared back at him, trying to hide her relief. It was obvious that Jacob thought she was checking up on him. A command office spy sent to check that he wasn't stealing UN-issue toilet paper. "I'll stay out of the restricted area," she said, trying to sound cool and authoritative, the bureaucrat abroad. "But I'll report what I like. Clear?" Hines let go of her arm. He laughed again. "Okay," he said. "Report what you like, then." He got out of the Land Rover. Joe suddenly felt cold in the hot, stuffy cab. Hines didn't seem to think that it mattered what she reported. And if it didn't matter, then probably... The Land Rover door opened. "I'll show you to your room." Fossils. Rowena Michaels was staring at hundreds of fossils. Skulls, rib cages, hips, femurs, jawbones. Many of them seemed almost complete. "I must be dreaming," she thought. But she knew she wasn't. She began to feel afraid. "Rowena?" Julie's voice. "Rowena, are you okay?" Rowena tried to move, felt a stab of pain from her back, turning, the gun in his hand. The gun... "I'm..." Rowena struggled with a dry throat, dry tongue, dry lips. I was shot again." She couldn't believe it, couldn't believe she'd been so dumb as to put herself in the way of a bullet again. And all for a piece of skull. Skull. Fossil skull. She stared at the fossils, found her voice again. "What the hell are those?" "Dead humans." The voice wasn't Julie's. It was oddly inflected, neutral, strange. The voice of, "The alien, oh God, the alien, where am I? What's happening to me?" "You will join them soon." "Ignore him," Julie's voice. "He's just trying to scare us." But Julie sounded scared herself, very scared. Rowena took a deep breath, then slowly, painfully, pushed herself upright with her arms. She was in a cave. Low, badly lit, damp, smelly. Turning her head, she could see the end of Julie's legs, with black restraining straps around them. She couldn't turn far enough to see her friend's face. Looking forward, she saw straps around her own legs. She couldn't see a bullet wound, couldn't feel any wound. Had Hines really shot her? Perhaps it had been some kind of tranquilizer. She couldn't remember. With an effort, she levered herself around so that she could face the alien. He was lying on a wooden pallet, his legs folded beneath him. He looked less horse-like now, more like a folded dragon in his black body armour, with its glittering constellation of lights. Rowena could see a keyboard unit around his neck. More primitive technology, almost certainly human in origin. There was a speaker attached, and a voice processor. She'd seen similar units in the hospital when she'd been recovering from her injuries. They were used by people who had lost the power of speech. "What's going to happen to us?" she asked the alien. The three-fingered hand moved over the keys. "You will die painfully, as many of my people will die painfully at the hands of your descendants." "Why?" "My life began in your future. Humans invaded my planet. This is my response." A whisper from Julie. "Jesus, Rowena, this can't be happening." Rowena remembered Joe, the stories of Autons and Axons and Daleks. "It's happening," she said. Then to the alien, "Look, I haven't done anything to your people. Julie hasn't either. Perhaps if you talk to our government now, we could find some way to prevent—" "I tried all that," interrupted Julie. Her voice was raw with fear. You are already dying, said the alien. You will be dead soon. Rowena closed her eyes. What did the alien mean? Poison? Virus? She could hear Julie's breathing, fast and hoarse. A faint moan of pain. Suddenly Rowena realized why Julie was so afraid. It had already started. She was sick, in pain. No! Rowena's own voice surprised her. This is crazy. You have to stop it, whatever it is. There's got to be a way we can live with your people. The fingers moved on the keyboard. Julie moaned again, a stifled, terrified sound. No, came the reply at last. There is only a way you can die with us. All of you, with all of us. The entire world we have both known. And that will happen very soon. There was a guard. A single, tall, dark-skinned man pacing up and down in the weak moonlight. Jo watched him for a while with some annoyance. Then she stepped down from the doorway of the hut, gave him a wave and a grin, and set off towards the trucks. He didn't challenge her. Heinz's Land Rover was gone. She followed the tyre tracks as far as the road, then walked a little way up the road towards the gorge. The night was hot. Insects whined in the darkness, and there was a faint chatter of cicadas from the long grass on the hillside. "Hey, miss!" "The guard," Jo sighed. "Miss, you can't go that way. Captain's orders." Jo turned, saw the man dimly silhouetted against the lights of the barrack huts. "I'm just getting a breath of fresh air," she explained. "Should I go the other way? Where does this restricted area start?" "Here, really," said the guard. "But I guess as long as you stay away from the cave, there won't be a problem. Go up to the top of the gorge. There's a path." He pointed, and Jo saw a crude flight of steps leading up from the road. Jo thanked him and started up the steps. The cave. Right. Only about 3 kilometers of cliff face to look at, in the dark. Where the hell was she going to start? A sharp click ahead of her answered her question. "Miss Grant," Jacob Hines' voice, "it's clear that you want to see your friends real bad." Jo could see him now, crouching in the shadows, the gun aimed directly at her. She began. "It's your lucky day," said Hines. He stood up, aimed the gun carefully at Jo's chest. "I'm able to reveal their location now. Just come along with me, and you'll get to join them right away."